Guys, listen closely, because what I'm about to show you is something no one expected, not even the scientists who have spent their entire lives studying interstellar objects. In the last 48 hours, new high-resolution images of the object, informally known as 3I/ATLAS, have dropped across multiple networks, from private observatories to amateur astrophotographers, and they're sending shockwaves through the entire scientific community. These aren't just clearer pictures. They're revelations, pieces of a puzzle that were never supposed to exist, anomalies that break the fundamental rules we rely on to understand how objects behave inside our solar system. And today, we're going to break down exactly why the world's top physicists, including Michio Kaku himself, are now openly admitting that something about Atlas is off, very off. The first thing you need to know is this. The new images do not confirm the typical profile of a comet or a wandering block of ice sublimating in sunlight. Instead, they show a single, unified body, still intact, yet producing multiple, narrow, well-defined jets that fire in different directions. Some of these jets point straight toward the sun, which is already strange, and others point away from it with such precision that the frames look almost staged. And I'm not exaggerating. These jets aren't diffuse, messy, caught in chaotic turbulence the way normal cometary tails behave. No, these are columnated, sharp, and coherent over distances that should be impossible for a small body under solar radiation pressure. Now here's where things get even more unbelievable. The images came from a variety of sources: Japan, Thailand, European astrophotographers, deep sky amateurs using high-end equipment like the C14 XLT and the 20-inch corrected Dell Kirkham systems. These photos were not taken at the same moment or under the same conditions. They span 6 full days between November 11th and November 17th, 2025. Yet, when people began lining them up, analyzing them frame by frame, something unsettling emerged. The object stays sharp. That's right, sharp. Even when nearby stars show elongated, stretched-out trails caused by long exposure tracking, Atlas appears as if frozen in place. Imagine taking a photo of a moving car at night and seeing every light in the background streak across the image, except the car. Doesn't make sense, right? But that's exactly what's happening here. What does that tell us? It signals that whatever is happening around Atlas does not follow the simple logic of an ice rock nucleus moving through space. Either the jets are producing stabilizing torque, something natural comets cannot do with this level of precision, or something else entirely is going on. Let me walk you through the next anomaly. The coma, the glowing halo surrounding the nucleus, shows erratic changes in brightness and color. Sometimes it burns orange, sometimes greenish, sometimes pale and nearly white. And these aren't changes over months, as we often see in comets when composition shifts. These are changes recorded within hours by observers located thousands of miles apart. That alone raises a big red flag, because a coma doesn't just switch color without an identifiable chemical trigger. Experienced observers who have spent decades studying cometary behavior, the kind of people who were the first to debunk sensational claims around objects like Oumuamua years ago, are now saying publicly that they can't fit Atlas's behavior into any known model of cometary physics. Not a single one. That should scare you a little, not in a catastrophic way, but in a scientific way, because when experts stop being able to explain something they thought they already understood, it means we're in the middle of a paradigm shift. Let's go deeper. Using rotation analysis based on repeated brightness patterns, specialists have estimated a rotation period of roughly 16 hours. Now, if this were a normal comet emitting jets across its surface, that rotation would twist the jets into spirals. You've seen it before. Beautiful corkscrew shapes, curved fans of dust carving sweeping arcs into space. But Atlas? No spirals. None. The jets remain straight, consistent, unbending, almost as if they're being produced by fixed points that compensate for rotation. And that brings us to the big problem, the one that's generating heated debate on scientific forums, space research groups, and exclusive Discord channels dedicated to deep sky monitoring. The energy required to generate jets that bright and that stable should exceed the capacity of a small body exposed only to solar radiation. In plain English, if Atlas were a natural comet, it shouldn't have enough energy to produce the spectacle we're seeing. Yet it's doing it anyway. This energy mismatch has led multiple researchers, quietly at first, then more boldly, to begin suggesting that the jets might not be simple outgassing. Some propose a configuration of volatile pockets arranged strategically across the surface, but that still wouldn't explain the columnated shape of the jets or why they maintain orientation over enormous distances. Others propose fragment-based ejecta, chunks evaporating into straight trails. But again, the consistency over days makes that explanation weak. So here's where we arrive at the point no one wanted to entertain, yet no one can dismiss anymore. Maybe we're not looking at a standard comet at all. Maybe we're looking at a technological object, or at the very least an object whose physics does not match the natural templates we've used for decades. Michio Kaku, in a recent interview, said that while natural explanations should be prioritized, scientists must keep an open mind when the data refuses to fit the box. And Atlas is refusing the box with shocking aggression. Consider this. If those jets were artificial thrusters, intentionally oriented, they could produce controlled acceleration. One thruster pointed sunward could push Atlas slightly off its gravitational track, allowing maneuvers that seem subtle but are completely unnatural for a comet. Is this proof? No. But is it impossible? Also no. And that's exactly why this hypothesis is gaining momentum. Not because people want aliens, but because the natural explanations are collapsing one by one. But the technological hypothesis isn't the only radical idea in play. A more unconventional proposal suggests Atlas might be a plasma-based life form. I get it. That sounds outrageous. But plasma structures that can self-organize, maintain shape under magnetic influence, and react to environmental stimuli have been observed in labs on a microscale. Now imagine something similar forming across interstellar space, evolving over millions of years, navigating electromagnetic fields like a literal living probe. Sci-fi? Maybe. Impossible? We don't know enough to say that anymore. What we do know is that these images, these jets, these bizarre color shifts, and this unnatural stability form a pattern that can no longer be brushed aside as just a comet doing weird comet things. We're looking at data that contradicts established cometary physics at multiple levels. And the deeper we dig, the stranger it gets. Before we go any further, you need to understand just how deeply the new data is shaking the foundation of what scientists assumed was settled physics. Because once the community began comparing the images, cross-checking exposures, analyzing the jet's angles and brightness curves, things escalated fast, and I mean fast. What started as a handful of observers saying, "This looks odd," turned into specialists admitting, "This doesn't make sense," and then transformed into a global debate about whether Atlas is even a natural object at all. Let's start with the rotation problem, because this is where the inconsistencies begin to pile up. Several independent teams measured periodic fluctuations in the coma's brightness and concluded that the nucleus rotates every 16 hours. Fine. That part seems straightforward, but here's where the contradiction slams into the conversation like a hammer. If Atlas really rotates at that speed, its jets should unwind, smear, and form corkscrew spirals, classic comet behavior. Instead, the jets remain rigid, line straight, anchored as if glued to invisible rails in space. Scientists tried modeling this using standard sublimation physics. It didn't match. They tried altering the models with unusual dust grains, lower surface temperatures, exaggerated solar wind variations. Still no match. Then they tried testing it under extreme hypothetical conditions. Nothing. One researcher even commented anonymously on a closed research forum, "It's like someone turned off the rotation for the jets but kept it for the nucleus. And if that doesn't raise your eyebrows, nothing will." And then comes the issue of luminosity. The brightness values observed, especially during the peaks between November 14th and November 17th, should require an enormous mass loss rate. To produce that much light from dust reflection alone, the object would need to shed more mass per hour than its estimated size can physically support. In simpler terms, Atlas should have torn itself apart already. It should be fragmented, unstable, riddled with cracks. But instead, it remains a unified body, not even showing signs of rotational instability. Think about how bizarre that is. Something is producing massive energy output without destroying the object producing it. Natural comets don't do that, not at this level, not with this consistency. Now, because natural models were failing at every checkpoint, researchers began branching into more unorthodox territory. Some speculated that the jets might be composed of extremely large dust grains, so large they behave like microfragments, capable of maintaining straight-line trajectories. But then spectroscopy threw that idea straight out the window. The composition detected did not align with that hypothesis. The spectral signatures didn't match large grain ejecta patterns. And the polarization measurements, even weirder. Atlas displayed extreme negative polarization, far more intense than any comet on record. That means the light interacting with the dust cloud is behaving in ways that defy conventional particle scattering models, as if the material around Atlas is fundamentally different from what we normally see. And if that wasn't enough, the plume analysis revealed something even more shocking: a disproportionately high nickel content. Natural comets do have metal traces, sure, but not at these levels. Combine this with the extremely low water percentage, around 4% by mass, and suddenly Atlas looks a lot less like a frozen interstellar snowball and a lot more like something engineered, processed, or at the very least altered by conditions we've never documented before. This is why you're hearing whispers, yes, whispers, of artificial propulsion. And I need to emphasize this. Scientists are not saying Atlas is an alien ship. They're not making claims. They're simply staring at a list of behaviors that fail every standard test and admitting that one explanation, however radical, checks more boxes than it should. If something were firing controlled jets like thrusters, it could explain the stability, the straight line geometry, the persistent orientation, the lack of spiral deformation, the strange acceleration patterns, even the way the object keeps resisting fragmentation. But here's where things take a wild turn. While the technological hypothesis is gaining quiet traction, another one is emerging on the fringe of theoretical physics, something even stranger, the plasma life-form hypothesis. And no, this isn't science fiction. The idea of coherent plasma structures capable of self-organization has been explored in theoretical studies for decades. Most people dismiss it because it lies far outside our carbon-based definition of life, but that doesn't make it impossible. Imagine a structure held together by electromagnetic fields rather than organic molecules. Imagine tissue made of charged particles, a body shaped by oscillating field patterns. Such a being could theoretically adapt, reconfigure itself, and react to environmental inputs, including solar radiation. That would perfectly explain the rapid color shifts, the brightness pulses, and why the coma seems to change its shape and tone as if responding to stimuli. It would also explain why the jets appear to switch on and off, as some time-lapse sequences suggest. We're not saying this is what Atlas is, but the fact that we're even discussing this seriously shows just how extraordinary this situation has become. And while the scientific community tries to stay grounded, the public narrative is spiraling into chaos. Official channels keep repeating comet, 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 almost as if trying to anchor the story into a safe category. Meanwhile, astrophotography groups are sharing images that contradict official interpretations. Amateur astronomers are reporting observations that can't be reconciled with cometary physics. And conspiracy-driven channels are accusing institutions of withholding data. It's a volatile mix: serious science, speculation, skepticism, and distrust. And then you have the veterans in the field, the people who usually debunk every extraordinary claim, coming out and saying, we don't know what this is anymore. Some even admitted that they are seeing phenomena they've never seen in decades of observing deep sky objects. That alone should tell you how unprecedented this is. So now researchers are mobilizing. They're launching coordinated observation campaigns using multi-wavelength telescopes. They're planning high-resolution spectroscopy runs. They're reviewing decades of archival data to look for overlooked objects that exhibited similar behavior. There's even talk about requesting dedicated time on instruments normally reserved for major planetary studies, because Atlas might represent something far more significant than a passing interstellar visitor. But with every new test, every new frame, every new analysis, the contradictions grow. Why hasn't Atlas fragmented? Why are its jets resisting spiral deformation? How can the object maintain orientation for millions of kilometers? Why does the coma change color so rapidly? And why are some images not being released as quickly as the amateurs' versions? All of this points to one conclusion. Whatever Atlas is, we're dealing with something that doesn't fit within the boundaries of known natural models. And that means the mystery isn't closing, it's widening. At this point, the question isn't whether Atlas is strange. The question is how deep the strangeness goes and whether we're prepared for what the evidence might imply. Because the more researchers dig into the numbers, the rotation, the jet geometry, the polarization, the plume composition, the mass loss contradictions, the more it becomes obvious that we're dealing with something that doesn't fit neatly into any natural category. Not a comet, not an asteroid, not an interstellar fragment behaving under simple physics. Something else. And that something else has now forced scientists, amateurs, and even major institutions to confront the possibility that we might be witnessing one of the most significant astronomical anomalies ever recorded. And now we need to talk about the 12 anomalies, because if you've been following along since the first images dropped, you already know that these aren't small quirks. These are major red flags, each one big enough to warrant independent investigation, but together forming a pattern so overwhelming that ignoring it becomes impossible. First, the retrograde trajectory aligned with the ecliptic, a path that statistically almost never happens for interstellar visitors. Second, those sunward jets and the anti-tail that maintains structure regardless of rotation. Third, the mass of the nucleus, unusually high compared to previous interstellar objects, yet still moving at a velocity hard to reconcile with gravitational capture alone. Fourth, the timing of its arrival, lining up with close approaches to Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, almost like a tour rather than a random path. Fifth, the plume containing unexpectedly high nickel content. Sixth, the remarkably low water percentage, just 4% by mass. Seventh, the extreme negative polarization that breaks known scattering models. Eighth, the arrival from the same general region of the sky as the historical WOW signal. Ninth, the rapid brightening and increasingly blue tone, shifting faster than any natural object should. 10th, jets requiring an absorbing area that contradicts the estimated nucleus size. 11th, non-gravitational acceleration that implies massive mass loss without any detectable debris cloud. And 12th, those rigid columnated jets that maintain orientation across millions of kilometers, defying the rotational distortion that every comet should exhibit. Any one of these would be enough to spark debate. All 12 together form a case that cannot be dismissed with a shrug or a casual, comets do weird things. No, this isn't weird. This is systematic, structured, patterned. Something is happening with Atlas that breaks the simple rules we teach in astronomy textbooks. And yet, despite the weight of these contradictions, nobody, not NASA, not ESA, not the Canadian Space Agency, not academic institutions, has offered a definitive explanation. Some say it's a comet with unusual dust grains. Others say it's a fragment of a larger interstellar body. Others claim there's image suppression or that certain frames are being delayed intentionally. But the truth is simpler. Nobody knows. And that uncertainty is becoming the center of gravity, pulling everyone into the discussion. Scientists are tightening the net, spectroscopy, simulations, coordinated telescopes, but even with all that, The fundamental questions remain unanswered. Why hasn't Atlas fragmented during perihelion? How do the jets remain stable? How do we reconcile rapid color shifts with no clear chemical driver? And why do amateur images, taken with consumer-grade equipment, sometimes reveal features that official releases ignore or fail to mention? These aren't trivial questions. They go straight to the heart of whether our models are incomplete or whether Atlas is something far more unusual. And this is where we reach the edge of certainty. If Atlas truly is a technological artifact, something equipped with propulsion, stabilization, and adaptive surface behavior, then we're looking at the first confirmed non-human device to ever enter our solar system. If it's a plasma-based life form, something self-organizing, electromagnetic, responsive to stimuli, then our concept of biology must expand beyond carbon and water. And if it's something else entirely, something we don't yet have the vocabulary to describe, then this moment may represent the beginning of a scientific revolution. But those are possibilities, not conclusions. And that distinction matters, because extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. We aren't there yet. We have anomalies, contradictions, patterns, and a long list of behaviors that defy easy classification. But we don't have definitive proof, not yet. And that means the only responsible path forward is continued observation, transparency, and scientific humility, something Michio Kaku emphasized himself, reminding the public that the universe often surprises us when our assumptions collapse. So here we stand, on the threshold of something potentially enormous, with more questions than answers. The mystery of Atlas isn't closing, it's accelerating. Every image, every measurement, every contradictory data point pushes us deeper into uncharted territory. And the next few weeks, especially as Atlas moves into new observational windows, are going to be critical. Now I want to hear from you. Which of the 12 anomalies stunned you the most? Which hypothesis, natural, artificial, or plasma-based, makes the most sense to you so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay close. Because whatever Atlas is, whatever story it's telling, we're only at the beginning, and the next chapter is going to hit hard.